Hey everybody, welcome to the Creativity Cave. I'm Dina Rico and I'm really excited to stamp with you today because I have two amazing projects. These two cards are so pretty and they use the Emboss Resist technique, and I just love how they've turned out, and they're totally different as you can see. So let's get to it, and I'm going to show you how to make both of these cards today. So the first card is a really fun, quick, easy card. It uses the stamp set You Deserve This, which is a really fun stamp set. I love this set because I actually have big plans to cut it up. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to cut apart all of these different pieces so that I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different stamps out of just one stamp right here. And then of course there's some really fun pieces that come along with the stamp set as well. So I really love how I can take one stamp set and make it like a bonus stamp set. I think that's kind of cool. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to do some Emboss Resist. Now, when I first started stamping, embossing was like the most amazing thing ever, and I loved doing it. But the way I'm doing it today is I'm going to emboss resist with watercolor. So what that means is, let me just protect my work surface here. I'm going to use watercolor paper. Watercolor paper works really well for watercoloring and gives you a much it gives you a really cool effect, much better than regular cardstock. I'm coating this with my embossing buddy so that I get all the oils from my fingers off of my cardstock so they don't pick up the embossing powder. Then I'm going to take my stamp and use Versamark ink to ink this up really well. And because this is a big stamp with a lot of area, I'm going over it a few times with my Versamark ink, and then I'm going to give it a really good push when I go down to stamp it. Okay. So I have a seam in my background, my paper that I'm working on, so I just want to make sure that that seam is covered up. And I'm just going to center this on here as best I can, and then like I said, I'm going to give it a good push. Oh, really put your arms into this. A lot of times when I stamp, I do a big stamp like this. I do it the other way around where I put the paper to the image, but I actually think I get a better impression doing it this way. Okay, I think I've been pressing pretty well for a good amount of time. Then I'm going to take my embossing powder. I've just got some white embossing powder in this container. And I'm going to, you could use clear powder as well. Either one works just fine. So I will coat my image with powder, and that looks great. I'm actually going to go over that big solid piece one more time, and I think we are good to go. I'll take my heat gun, and I just want to really heat this up nice. As soon as it melts, you can kind of move on to the next spot. In fact, I always kind of think it's fun to see which melts first. Okay, now I've got everything embossed. Next, I'm going to take my aqua painter and I am going to spread some clear water all over the background. Now, what happens in my emboss resist process is the embossing we've done. Now we got to get the resisting. And what happens is when you emboss and then you put color over it, you can apply the color in lots of different ways. I'm using watercolor today, but the embossing is going to resist that color. So you'll see the image through. We're going to add some color using our aqua painters, and I'm going to pick up the ink in the lid of my ink pad, and I'm just going to spread it out onto my watercoloring, and you can see the image pop right through, which isn't that fun? I love that part of it. And I'm going to use 3 colors today. I started with Crushed Curry. I'll add Emerald Envy and Tempting Turquoise. And each color I'm just going to pick up. I'm cleaning my brush off on my... I got to find my watercolor rags. I cleaned them up and I don't know what I did with them. I must have put them away. See, that's why you don't clean your stamp room. Bad things happen, like you lose stuff. So then you can see I have varying intensities of the color, and I'm kind of mixing it in with the Crushed Curry that I've already got down. Okay, and then I'll clean that off over here, and I'll do my last color. And then what I'm going to do is, you can see like here on the Woohoo, the color is kind of over the embossing, and I have a fix for that, and I'll show you that in just a second. But last but not least, I'm going to do my Tempting Turquoise. Now, the reason I put the water down at the very beginning is because it helps everything kind of blend together, so you don't have like weird lines between the colors, and it just makes everything work really nicely. So the colors just blend nicely and look great. So there are my 3 colors. So that worked out pretty well. Close these up. And then I will grab a tissue from my Kleenex box, and I'm just going to carefully kind of tap that excess color right off. I don't want to dab too much because I want to make sure you can still enjoy the color. But I'm just going to get some of it off of the white spots. Now, when it dries, it'll be awesome. Isn't that cool? Now, all I'm going to do is layer this up onto a Emerald Envy layer of cardstock, and then pop it up onto my... I know the color I used here was Crushed Curry, but I actually used a Daffodil Delight card base because I like the yellow better in the card stock. That's just my personal opinion. Now, to embellish it, let me show you what I used. I've got my eclectic shape clips, and I'm just going to take this little Crushed Curry one, and then I'll add some coordinating, because you know everything coordinates. Crushed Curry mini chevron ribbon. I happen to have like a little chunk of it here left over from another project, and I'm just going to tie a knot on here onto my clip, and then we'll add this. Now, of course, I'm waiting for this to dry, and I probably won't actually finish adhering all the layers together because I think that part's pretty easy, but I just wanted you to see how I tied that on like so, and then I just clipped it onto my card. Really quite easy, like so. So there's another one. But anyway, I just added that clip because I thought a little embellishment would be fun on this. So anyway, I hope you like this card. Let's do our next card, which is adorable. I shouldn't say adorable, it's gorgeous. Adorable is not even the right color, or word, term, whatever. So this card uses the gorgeous Graceful Garden, and I really like the color combination I have on this one, which is Pear Pizzazz Elegant Eggplant, Soft Sky, and Rich Razzleberry. I love those deep pinky purple hues that I was able to get on this card. So we're going to do much the same thing on this one. I'm going to start with a piece of my watercolor paper. I'm going to use my embossing buddy, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp my image, which I have right over here, again with the Versamark. This time I'm going to emboss it in gold. And I love the gold. I think this makes it look really fancy. So we'll do the same thing, and I kind of have mine at an angle here, like so. I'm just holding this down really good. Okay. Now this time, like I said, I'm going to use gold powder. I've got my bin of this as well. And I will sprinkle it on and heat it up. just like before. Okay. Okay, now remember I used my tissue. What did I do with it? There we go. I used my tissue on the last one. I'm going to use it once more on this one. And I'm just going to kind of wipe around my image. Sometimes you get this sort of dust from your embossing powder, and I just kind of want to get that off. And the reason is when I was watercoloring my sample, my original, it sort of got a little dirty. And I'll show you what I mean because you'll see. But okay, now this one is going to take a little bit more time, but we're still doing really basic watercoloring. So on this one, I started with my soft sky to create the background. And you'll notice, I think, when you see this, how the color just pops the image off the paper. So I'm going to go around and I just want a light wash of color. And you can see, I think this really makes the image pop, but I'm being careful not to get too much color because we don't want to overwhelm anybody with this. And I'm not quite going up to the edge. I think part of my problem is I've had this embossing powder for a long time. And by a long time, I mean like probably 15 years plus. And I think what I need to do is just get new powder. But I have such a huge thing of it because I went a little nutso when I first got it and bought a whole bunch of little containers of it and then dumped it all in that bin. And I think what I need to do is give up on that bin and just get some new stuff. Okay, and again, look at that beautiful background. Now, don't you think that blue really pops the image up off of the paper a little? I think it does too. And also note that I have a little bit darker color on the bottom side and a little lighter on the top side of my image. And that just kind of goes with shading and lighting and all of that, but it's pretty basic. Okay, so we want that to dry really well. We're also going to use these colors. I'm going to start next with my Pear Pizzazz. And of course, if you need to let it dry, that's okay. Because of the video, I'm going to go ahead and get going on this a little bit, but I'm going to be careful. What's nice about the embossing is it kind of keeps the color inside the lines, which I love. Okay, so I'll go over my leaf. I want the darkest color in the center where the embossing is. And I'll clean off some of my color and then spread it a little lighter around the tips. And sometimes that takes a little bit of a process. You kind of got to add the color to build it up a little bit. So again, I'll add some more here. Okay. That looks pretty good. And again, the embossing, you're resisting that color. Love it. So I think we're good on the leaf. And just adding a little bit of airflow to convince it to dry. Okay, then I'll pick up my rich razzleberry. And I'll set that over here. Just cleaning my aqua painter off a little bit. All right, so I'm going to pick up my rich razzleberry and I'm going to kind of messy go over the whole thing. Okay. Again, I'm going to be a little careful around the edges because I don't want the water to bleed into my background. But again, the embossing does a really good job of stopping that watercolor from going anywhere I don't really want it to go. As long as my brush stays under control, I will be in good shape. And I haven't decided if I think that little thing sticking out on either top or bottom is supposed to be a green leaf or a petal. I don't know. When I made the first one, I kind of thought it was a petal, but now as I'm looking at it again, I kind of think it's a leaf, so I don't know. Okay, so there's my coloring. You can see I have some lighter and darker areas. So now I'm going to fill in and add a little color to some of the spots. I like how the water kind of pools and blends out on its own with the color. But generally I want closer to the inside of the flower to be darker and towards the outside to be lighter. But that's what I love about the water, is it kind of does that for me. Get a little darker down there. All right, and then we're going to add just a little bit of purple to kind of jazz things up. Now, one thing I didn't do on my sample, but I think I'm going to do here, you can see I'm just going to add some purple. And again, I'm not being super careful. I'm just kind of throwing some color in there. I want to make sure all the colors are visible, but how gorgeous is that? Again, it's not fancy watercoloring technique. It's just sort of blobbing it on, and then the embossing resists that watercolor and it looks gorgeous. Okay, now we're going to let it dry. I'll be right back. Okay, we want to make sure this is really dry before we do the next step, otherwise we're going to have a disaster, and we don't want that. I'm going to take this really cool background image that comes in the Graceful Garden stamp set and stamp the background with some soft sky ink. Now at the bottom, remember we have the darkest color, so I'm going to go right over the top like so. And this just adds some texture to the background, all right? Now I'm going to ink it up again, but I'm going to stamp off one layer of ink, and I'll stamp it once more on here. And I've got a little lighter texture down here. Okay, I'll ink it up and stamp it off one final time, and then stamp that right over here. Now what I have is a really subtle pattern in the background of my card, just to really kind of add a nice little extra layer of depth in my coloring. Okay, and then last but not least, there's the For You stamp that comes in this stamp set. I just got a little ink on the edge, so I'm going to kind of clean that off. And I want to practice that once before I commit to it. Again, I got the ink on, so I'm just wiping it off so I don't get too much ink. Perfect, and I put For You at the bottom. All right, let's finish this off. Since it is dry, we can go ahead and do that. I'll turn this over, and I'm going to put some fast fuse on here, and I'm going to put kind of a lot because of the warping from my watercoloring. I want to make sure that it adheres really well to my cardstock. Now, all the dimensions and everything, supplies and all of that are on my blog post, and the link is in the description of this video, so make sure you check that out because all the details are there. And then I'm using some of the, I believe this, gosh, I can't think of the name of this DSP. It'll be in the directions, but I believe it's Garden Trellis, maybe? No, that's, well, I'm not sure. Painted Garden, oh, I don't know. I can't remember, but it all coordinates, which is lovely. So I've got this on here. It's part of the Graceful Garden sort of suite of products. There's printed paper, there's a Memories and More set of cards. I think there's some ribbon, so it all coordinates. Now I'm going to use the gold natural trim to tie a little knot and add another accent of gold onto my card. And that will finish it off. I just think this is so pretty. And of course, this is really the same technique, but just two totally different looks that you can achieve depending on how you go about it. And again, this is not fancy watercoloring. This is watercoloring that anybody can do because, as you saw, I just kind of blobbed it on. There's not a lot of detail work involved. Lastly, I will pop this onto my card with some dimensionals, like so. Use some of those edge pieces, and I'll throw one in the middle. And you have a beautiful card with some really cool texture on it. So I hope you enjoyed my cards today. I'll grab my other one. so you can see it. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you need any supplies, please shop my online store. And when you order through the Creativity Cave, you'll become a VIP rewards member, and there's lots of awesome perks for that. And don't forget to click on the little box right here to subscribe to my channel so that you can get lots of fabulous new ideas from me each week. Thank you so much for joining me and stamping with me today, guys. Have a great day. Bye.